was holding my stillborn baby when my boss texted, "Since you're technically no longer a mother, you don't get maternity leave." He called 43 times until I let a client call, showed up at her memorial service to yell about lost accounts, then walked into my hospital room while I was getting a blood transfusion with his laptop demanding quarterly reports. He'd done this to 3 other women, including one at her mother's funeral and another during chemo. I was holding my stillborn baby in my arms when my boss Jackson texted me, "Just heard about the miscarriage. Since you're technically no longer a mother, you don't get maternity leave and are expected to be available and on top of your assignments. Quarterly reports are due in 1 week. Don't be late." The next day, he called me 43 times until I answered the phone. "Great, you can talk. That means you can lead the 3 p.m. client call from home." He hung up without letting me get a word in and forwarded the 17-page PDF with all the information for the meeting. At 3:02, I got a barrage of texts asking where I was. 2 days later, my entire family was in our backyard for our Luna's memorial service. My mother was speaking about all the dreams she'd had for her granddaughter when I heard the gate creak open. Jackson walked in wearing a Versace suit. "You cost us the account by no-showing that call," he yelled at me, interrupting my mom. "I'm reassigning your clients. You clearly can't handle responsibility." My husband Kai shot across the yard immediately and physically blocked Jackson at the gate. "Get off my property before I remove you myself." Jackson actually tried explaining to my husband how I was at fault here, but Kai cut him off. "This could be the Pope's account. I don't care. You have 5 seconds to leave before I make you." That evening, Kai filed a complaint with HR on my behalf. Vivian Cross, the HR director, said that Jackson was actually trying to save my job. Apparently, the client was furious that nobody showed up to the meeting, and Jackson was putting himself on the line by not firing me. Vivian actually suggested I write an apology letter to the client as well as Jackson himself. Another 3 days later, I got an email from Jackson. "Reminder, your quarterly reports are due in 48 hours. Failure to present these will have serious professional ramifications." Kai called Jackson the moment he read the email. "Listen you, my wife is recovering from delivering our dead daughter. What about that sentence doesn't compute in your tiny brain?" Jackson shot back. "The quarterly deadline comes from the board, not me. I'm trying to help her keep her job. I don't care. Just because your daddy runs the company doesn't mean my wife will come running when you snap your fingers." Kai and I went back to HR together after that. Vivian acted shocked and said she was sorry, but we needed to understand Jackson was just being a professional in following up, that my absence did cost the account, and because I wasn't responding to texts, Jackson had to resort to this to inform me of the damage my actions had done. Vivian actually suggested I start working from home as soon as possible. If I couldn't work, they'd have no choice but to pull our medical insurance. "That would be really expensive for you too," Vivian said. The day the quarterly reports were due, I woke up hemorrhaging badly from an infection caused by stress. Kai rushed me to the ER where they started an emergency blood transfusion. Kai stepped into the bathroom for just a minute. I was literally fighting for my life when Jackson walked into the hospital room holding his laptop. "Why are the quarterly reports not done?" He started showing me spreadsheets, but Kai came out and literally snatched the laptop from Jackson. He physically herded Jackson into the hallway and threw the laptop at his feet. "Come near my wife again. You'll be the one laying in this bed, you understand?" After security removed Jackson, Kai drove straight to the CEO's office. He showed him photos of me hooked to blood bags with Jackson standing over me. "The circumstances are unfortunate," the CEO said, "but quarterly reports affect our funding." Jackson was ensuring investor interests were protected. "Other employees have worked through similar losses to yours." He even implied to Kai that they could pursue legal action against me for the missed client meeting, but they wouldn't out of compassion. The very next day, everything exploded. My primary nurse came to me with this horrified look. She started telling me about medical bill payment plans. Kai cut her off to tell them my job has insurance, but the nurse's face dropped. Turns out Jackson had canceled my insurance for job abandonment. Not only that, but my payslip that came in that morning had me marked as no call, no show, meaning I wouldn't be getting paid either. I immediately went to log on to my company email, but my credentials wouldn't work. The account was no longer valid. That's how I found out I had been fired. I had to check myself out of the hospital early because I knew Kai and I couldn't afford staying there for any longer. That night, Kai completely lost it. He pulled out his phone and called his lawyer friend. By morning, we had a top employment lawyer representing us. He laughed about how screwed Jackson and the whole company was when he heard our case. By noon, he'd filed an emergency injunction for insurance reinstatement and criminal charges. The papers were served to the CEO by the lawyer himself at 2 p.m. I heard Mr. CEO turned white when he read them. The CEO's secretary called within an hour, her voice shaking as she requested an immediate meeting. Kai drove me there despite my protests about needing rest. I could barely walk straight, still weak from the blood loss, but I needed to be there. The conference room was packed. The CEO sat at the head of the table, flanked by company lawyers. Vivian Cross sat rigidly in her chair, avoiding eye contact. Jackson lounged in his seat like he owned the place, which technically his father did. Our lawyer, Robert Rothstein, laid out document after document on the table. Hospital records, text messages, email chains, witness statements from nurses. Each piece of evidence landed like a hammer blow. The CEO cleared his throat and started talking about misunderstandings and miscommunications. Robert cut him off by sliding over a printout showing my insurance cancellation, time-stamped while I was receiving emergency treatment. Jackson finally spoke up, claiming I had abandoned my position and cost the company a major account. He pulled out his phone to show supposed evidence, but Robert was ready. He produced the original client email, sent after the missed meeting, expressing concern for my well-being and shock at the company's handling of the situation. The room went silent. The CEO's face turned an interesting shade of purple as he read the email. The client hadn't been angry about the missed meeting. They were appalled by Jackson's behavior and had already decided to terminate their contract. Vivian tried to salvage the situation by producing my personnel file, claiming there were previous performance issues. Robert smiled and pulled out my last 5 performance reviews. All excellent, all signed by Jackson himself. The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, the company lawyers were whispering frantically to the CEO. Jackson's smugness had evaporated, replaced by something that looked like fear. The CEO finally spoke directly to me, offering immediate reinstatement with full back pay and benefits. Robert laughed out loud at that. "We weren't there to negotiate my return. We were there to discuss damages." Kai squeezed my hand under the table as Robert outlined our position. Wrongful termination, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, insurance fraud. The list went on. Jackson exploded, jumping up from his chair and pointing at me. He ranted about ungrateful employees and how his father built this company. Security had to escort him out when he started throwing papers. The CEO aged 10 years in those few minutes. He turned to Vivian and asked for her resignation on the spot. She left without a word, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. Over the next week, things moved fast. The company offered a settlement that would cover my medical bills and then some. Robert advised us to wait. He was building a bigger case. More employees came forward. Jackson had a pattern, it turned out. 3 other women had similar stories. One had quit after he showed up at her mother's funeral demanding she return to work. Another had been fired while undergoing chemotherapy. Kai spent hours helping Robert organize testimonies. I focused on recovering, both physically and emotionally. The infection had done more damage than we initially thought. I needed additional procedures, each one adding to our mounting medical debt. Jackson didn't go quietly. He hired his own legal team and started a campaign to discredit me. Anonymous posts appeared on professional networking sites, claiming I was a difficult employee who used personal tragedy to avoid work. Robert traced the posts back to IP addresses at the company. More evidence for our case. The CEO called personally to apologize and distance the company from Jackson's actions, but Robert recorded the call. The CEO accidentally admitted he'd known about Jackson's behavior for years. My health took another downturn 2 weeks later. The stress was preventing proper healing. Doctors warned that without rest and reduced anxiety, I risked permanent damage. Kai wanted me to drop everything and focus on recovery, but I couldn't let Jackson win. Robert arranged for depositions to be conducted at our home. Former employees sat in our living room, sharing their stories while a court reporter typed away. Each testimony painted a clearer picture of systematic abuse enabled by company leadership. Jackson's father finally intervened, flying in from his retirement in Florida. He showed up at our door unannounced, expecting to smooth things over with a check. Kai wouldn't let him pass the porch. The old man threatened to bury us in legal fees. Kai calmly recorded the entire interaction on his phone. The other victims formed a support group. We met weekly at a local coffee shop, sharing our experiences and strengthening our resolve. One woman, Catherine, had kept meticulous records of every interaction with Jackson. I'm trying to understand how someone could walk into a hospital room where a person is getting a blood transfusion and demand work reports. How does Jackson's brain work that he thinks quarterly reports matter more than someone literally fighting for their life? Her documentation became crucial to our case. Jackson made one last desperate move. He showed up at the hospital during one of my follow-up appointments, trying to serve me with a countersuit for defamation. Hospital security removed him, but not before several patients witnessed him screaming at a woman still recovering from pregnancy loss. The company's board of directors called an emergency meeting. Robert had been in contact with several board members, sharing evidence of the CEO's knowledge and complicity. The business news picked up hints of internal turmoil, though we kept our names out of it. 3 months after Luna's memorial service, we received word that the board had voted. The CEO was out, effective immediately. Jackson's father was removed from the board. A new leadership team was brought in to clean house, but Jackson himself remained defiant. His family's money meant he could keep fighting, keep trying to intimidate us into dropping our case. He sent flowers to our house with a card that read, "Sorry for your loss." 3 months too late and dripping with sarcasm. Kai installed security cameras after that. We documented everything, building an even stronger case. Robert was confident we would prevail, but warned it could take years if Jackson kept stalling. My recovery stalled. The doctors were concerned about complications from the infection. I needed surgery, but our insurance situation was still in limbo. The company had reinstated it retroactively, but the insurance company was fighting coverage due to the gap. We were at a crossroads. Accept a settlement and move on, or continue fighting for full justice. The other victims looked to me for leadership, but I was barely holding myself together. The loss of Luna, the trauma of Jackson's harassment, the ongoing health crisis. It was almost too much to bear. Kai never wavered. He took time off work to care for me, attended every legal meeting, and coordinated with the other families affected by Jackson's behavior. His unwavering support kept me going when I wanted to give up. As I prepared for another surgery, uncertain about what lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain. Jackson had picked the wrong family to terrorize. We would see this through to the end, no matter how long it took. The morning of my surgery arrived with Kai helping me into the car. My hands shook as I signed the consent forms at the hospital, knowing our savings account held barely enough to cover the deductible. The anesthesiologist explained the risks while I nodded, my mind elsewhere. Kai kissed my forehead before they wheeled me away. I woke hours later to find Kai slumped in the bedside chair, dark circles under his eyes. He'd been awake for 36 hours straight, coordinating with Robert while managing my care. The surgery had gone well, but recovery would take weeks. More time away from work, more ammunition for Jackson. Robert visited that afternoon with a thick folder of documents. He spread papers across my hospital tray table, showing depositions from 12 former employees. Each told variations of the same story. Jackson targeting women during vulnerable moments. Vivian covering it up. The CEO turning a blind eye for years. One testimony stood out. A former marketing director named Sarah had recorded Jackson on her phone during a particularly vicious tirade. Robert played the audio quietly, and I recognized the same tone he'd used with me. The same threats about job security. The same dismissal of personal tragedy. Kai's phone buzzed constantly. Bills arriving faster than we could process them. The mortgage company calling about late payments. Credit card companies increasing interest rates. Each notification added another weight to his shoulders. I insisted on being discharged early again, against medical advice. The doctor warned about infection risks, but staying meant more debt. Kai helped me to the car, supporting most of my weight. Neither of us mentioned the bills stuffed in the glove compartment. At home, I found our mailbox overflowing. Between the medical statements and legal documents sat an official-looking envelope from the state unemployment office. My claim had been denied. The reason listed was job abandonment. Jackson's influence reached even there. Robert called an emergency strategy meeting in our living room. Catherine arrived first, bringing copies of every email Jackson had ever sent her. Another victim, Maria, showed text messages from Vivian threatening her children's health insurance. The pattern became undeniable. Jackson escalated his tactics. A process server appeared at our door during dinner, delivering papers for a defamation lawsuit. The amount he sought would bankrupt us 3 times over. Robert examined the documents and shook his head. Jackson's lawyers were among the most expensive in the state. Our first court date for the injunction arrived on a Thursday. I could barely stand, but appearance mattered. Kai helped me into my only suit, now hanging loose on my frame. The courthouse steps seemed endless. Inside, Jackson sat with 3 lawyers. His father occupied the back row, stone-faced. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, reviewed our emergency motion for insurance reinstatement. Jackson's team argued I'd violated company policy by missing work without proper documentation. Robert presented the timeline methodically: the stillbirth, the memorial service interruption, the hospital harassment. The judge's expression hardened with each piece of evidence. She granted our injunction, ordering immediate insurance reinstatement, but warned this was just the beginning. Jackson cornered me in the courthouse bathroom afterward. He blocked the door, speaking in low tones about how his family had resources I couldn't imagine, how they'd dragged this out until we were living in our car. Kai found us there, physically moving Jackson aside. Security intervened before it escalated further. The insurance company fought the reinstatement order. They claimed the coverage gap created complications, more forms to fill out, more phone calls where representatives put us on hold for hours. Meanwhile, collection agencies started calling about the hospital bills. Robert discovered something significant in Jackson's employment contract. Despite his father owning the company, Jackson's position came with specific behavioral clauses. Violations could result in immediate termination without severance. We had him on at least 15 violations. The new CEO reached out privately through intermediaries. She wanted to settle quietly, clean up the company's reputation. The offer was substantial but came with conditions. We'd have to sign non-disclosure agreements. The other victims would get nothing. Jackson would keep his job with a slap on the wrist. We refused. Catherine and Maria stood with us. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about preventing Jackson from doing this again. The new CEO withdrew the offer and lawyered up. My health deteriorated from the stress. The surgical site showed signs of infection. Antibiotics weren't working as well as hoped. The doctor wanted to admit me again, but I knew we couldn't afford it. Kai set up a makeshift care station in our bedroom, changing dressings every few hours. Jackson's legal team filed motion after motion, requests for dismissal, claims of procedural errors, demands for extensive documentation. Robert countered each one, but it meant more billable hours. Our retainer ran out quickly. Catherine suggested crowdfunding for legal fees. Within days, our story spread through professional networks. Women from across the country shared similar experiences. The fund grew slowly but steadily. Jackson's lawyers sent cease and desist letters about the campaign. The deposition phase began. I spent 8 hours in a conference room, answering invasive questions about my pregnancy, my work history, my marriage. Jackson's lawyer tried to paint me as emotionally unstable, unfit for corporate work. Robert objected repeatedly, but the damage accumulated. Kai's deposition was worse. They questioned his temper, his threats to Jackson, his decision to involve lawyers. They had photos of him at the hospital, looking aggressive. Security footage from the courthouse bathroom incident. They were building a counter-narrative. More former employees reached out after seeing the crowdfunding page. Robert's paralegal spent days organizing their statements. The evidence mounted, but so did the complexity. Jackson's team would challenge every single testimony. The company's internal investigation concluded with predictable results. They found no evidence of systematic harassment. Vivian, despite resigning, provided a statement supporting this conclusion. The new CEO used this to justify fighting our lawsuit. Financial pressure mounted. Kai picked up extra shifts, working nights and weekends. I tried freelance work from bed, but concentration was difficult with the pain medication. We sold my car, then Kai's motorcycle. Small sacrifices that felt enormous. Jackson made a calculated move. He promoted several women at the company, issuing press releases about his commitment to workplace equality. Photos appeared on the company website showing him at diversity seminars, building a defense through public relations. Robert uncovered communication between Jackson and Vivian after her resignation. They'd coordinated their stories, destroyed documents, influenced the internal investigation. It was obstruction, but proving it would require more resources than we had. The other victims began to waver. Maria's husband lost his job, and they needed to settle quickly. Another woman's child required surgery, and the medical bills were overwhelming. The solidarity we'd built started to crack under financial pressure. Jackson's father increased the pressure. He had connections throughout the business community. Suddenly, Kai's employer started finding issues with his performance. Minor infractions became written warnings. Jackson's playing chess while everyone else is trying to survive checkers. Showing up at the hospital with legal papers is definitely a new low in the terrible boss handbook. The message was clear. I developed complications requiring another procedure. This time, there was no avoiding hospitalization. The infection had spread. Kai sat by my bed, calculator in hand, figuring out payment plans. We'd already borrowed from both sets of parents. Robert worked out a contingency arrangement, taking the case for a percentage of any settlement. It meant he believed we'd win, but also that we'd give up a significant portion of any award. We signed without hesitation. The mediation date approached. Both sides would meet with a neutral arbitrator to attempt resolution. Robert prepared us for disappointment. Mediation rarely worked when one side held all the power, but the court required the attempt. Jackson arrived at mediation in a new luxury car, flanked by his legal team. He'd gained weight, looked prosperous. The contrast to our circumstances couldn't have been starker. He smirked when he saw me using a cane for support. The mediator, a retired judge, reviewed the case summary. Hours passed in separate rooms while offers went back and forth. The company's position barely budged. They'd pay my medical bills if we dropped everything else. No admission of wrongdoing, no justice for the others. We left mediation without agreement. In the parking garage, Jackson approached one last time. He offered a personal check, off the books, if I'd convinced the others to drop their claims. The number was substantial. Kai stepped between us before I could respond. That night, we sat at our kitchen table surrounded by bills, legal documents, and medical records. The mortgage was 3 months behind, credit cards maxed out, retirement savings depleted. Fighting Jackson was destroying us financially. But then Catherine called. She'd found something in old company archives, a settlement from 5 years ago, sealed by the court. Another woman Jackson had targeted. Another cover-up by the old CEO. Robert immediately filed to unseal those records. The company fought the unsealing motion vigorously. Whatever was in those documents terrified them. The judge scheduled a hearing. This could be the breakthrough we needed, or another dead end. I returned to the hospital for test results. The infection had caused permanent damage. My ability to have children in the future was now in question. Another loss courtesy of Jackson's harassment. Kai held me while I processed this news. The unsealing hearing arrived. The company's lawyers argued attorney-client privilege, trade secrets, every possible exemption. Robert countered that patterns of harassment weren't protected information. The judge took it under advisement. While waiting for the ruling, Jackson made another mistake. break. He approached Catherine directly, offering her a job at double her previous salary if she'd withdraw from the lawsuit. She recorded the entire conversation. Witness tampering added to our claims. My parents mortgaged their house to help with our legal bills. Kai's family contributed what they could. The crowdfunding continued trickling in. Every dollar meant we could fight another day, but the debt felt insurmountable. Then the judge ruled. The sealed records would be opened. The company had 48 hours to produce them. Jackson's legal team immediately appealed, but the damage was done. Whatever they were hiding would come to light. Robert called an urgent meeting. The unsealed documents revealed not one, but 3 previous settlements. Each involved Jackson. Each had been covered up with money and threats. The total paid out exceeded $2 million, all from company funds. The new CEO called personally this time. No intermediaries. She offered a settlement that would cover all victims, require Jackson's termination, and include a public admission of wrongdoing. The number was serious, but she needed an answer within 24 hours. We gathered all the victims at our house, Catherine, Maria, and 2 others who'd recently joined. Each woman shared what the fight had cost her. Marriages strained, careers derailed, health destroyed, but also what it meant to stand together. The vote was unanimous. We'd accept the settlement, but with conditions. Jackson's termination had to be for cause, preventing any golden parachute. The company had to implement real oversight, and the admission of wrongdoing couldn't be watered down with legal language. Negotiations stretched through the night. Robert fought for every detail. The company pushed back on the public admission. They wanted carefully crafted language that admitted nothing substantial. We held firm. By morning, we had an agreement. Jackson would be terminated for cause within 7 days. Each victim would receive compensation proportional to their damages. The company would issue a statement acknowledging systematic failures in protecting employees. But Jackson had one more card to play. That afternoon, we learned he'd filed a separate lawsuit against me personally. He claimed I'd conspired to destroy his career out of spite. The filing was timed to pressure us into excluding him from the settlement terms. Robert saw through the tactic immediately. If we proceeded with the settlement as structured, Jackson's personal lawsuit would lose its foundation. His termination for cause would be based on documented violations, not our accusations. We stayed the course. The settlement signing took place in the same conference room where this had all started. The new CEO attended personally, along with board representatives. Each victim signed their portion. When finished, the CEO turned to her assistant and spoke 2 words that made it real. Fire Jackson. Within an hour, security escorted him from the building. His company email was deactivated. His parking pass revoked. 15 years of protection from his father ended with a 2-sentence termination letter. The company's public statement made business news. While carefully worded, it acknowledged failures in protecting employees from harassment. It announced new policies, independent oversight, and mandatory training. Small steps, but steps forward. Jackson's personal lawsuit against me continued briefly. Without company resources, paying his expensive lawyers out of pocket, he quickly realized the futility. His voluntary dismissal arrived within 2 weeks. The settlement money cleared our debts with enough left to rebuild. Medical bills paid, mortgage caught up, credit cards cleared. The relief felt physical, like removing a weight from my chest. The settlement funds hit our account on a Tuesday morning. I sat at the kitchen table, refreshing the banking app repeatedly until the numbers changed. Kai made coffee while I calculated what we could pay off first. The medical bills had priority, then the mortgage arrears. Robert called with paperwork requiring signatures. The company wanted everything finalized before their quarterly earnings call. I drove to his office, still using the cane for support. My recovery had plateaued, leaving me with a permanent limp the doctor said might improve with time. Catherine met me in the lobby. She'd already signed her portion and wanted to coordinate our next steps. The company had promised new oversight policies, but someone needed to ensure implementation. We agreed to monitor their progress together. Back home, I found Kai organizing our financial documents. The settlement would cover our debts, but barely. We'd need to rebuild our savings from scratch. He'd already started applying for better paying positions, leveraging his recent experience with employment law. The first bill I paid was to the hospital. The satisfaction of marking it paid in full felt hollow compared to what we'd lost. Luna's nursery remained untouched, door closed. Neither of us had the strength to face that room yet. Jackson's termination became official that Thursday. Robert forwarded the company announcement, a brief statement about pursuing other opportunities. No mention of the harassment, the cover-ups, or the victims he'd left in his wake. The sanitized version protected the company's image. I started physical therapy the following week. The therapist explained how stress-induced infections could cause lasting damage. Each session brought small improvements, though full recovery seemed unlikely. Kai drove me to every appointment, working remotely from the waiting room. Maria called to thank me for standing firm during negotiations. Her portion of the settlement had covered her son's surgery with enough left for recovery care. She'd found new employment at a smaller firm, one with better policies. Her voice sounded lighter than it had in months. The company's new policies rolled out gradually. Mandatory training sessions for managers, anonymous reporting systems, third-party investigations for harassment claims. Catherine attended the first training session as an observer, reporting back on the implementation. Kai's job search yielded results faster than expected. A competing firm had followed our case and wanted someone with his determination. The salary increase would help rebuild our finances. He accepted immediately, giving notice at his current position. I attempted freelance work from home, but concentration remained difficult. The medications for nerve damage made me foggy. Simple tasks took twice as long. Clients grew frustrated with delays. My professional reputation, already damaged by Jackson's smear campaign, deteriorated further. Robert closed our case file officially after all payments cleared. He'd taken his percentage, as agreed, leaving us with enough to survive but not thrive. He offered to help with any future employment issues pro bono, a gesture we hoped we'd never need. The house felt different without the constant stress of legal battles. Kai and I moved through rooms like strangers, unsure how to exist without crisis. We'd been in survival mode so long, normal life felt foreign. Dinners passed in silence, both of us lost in separate thoughts. There's something unsettling about how Jackson keeps approaching victims directly. First the parking garage offer, then Catherine with a job bribe, like he genuinely believes money solves everything he's done to these women's lives. Catherine discovered Jackson had started his own consulting firm. Using family money and connections, he'd rebranded himself as a workplace efficiency expert. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Money and privilege had insulated him from real consequences once again. My parents visited for a week, helping with household tasks I couldn't manage. My mother cleaned while my father repaired things we'd neglected contacted during the legal fight. They didn't mention the money they'd lent us, though I knew they'd sacrificed their retirement plans. The infection's lasting damage became clearer during follow-up appointments. Scar tissue had formed throughout my reproductive system. The doctor explained options, but her tone suggested limited hope. Another dream destroyed by Jackson's cruelty, though this loss felt almost anticlimactic after everything else. Kai started his new position on a Monday. I watched him dress in his suit, noticing how much weight he'd lost during our ordeal. He kissed me goodbye at the door, and I spent the day alone for the first time in months. The silence felt oppressive. I tried returning to the nursery that afternoon. The door creaked open to reveal everything exactly as we'd left it. The crib my mother had assembled, the rocking chair Kai had surprised me with, tiny clothes still in their packages. I closed the door without entering. Bills continued arriving despite the settlement. New medical expenses from ongoing treatment, legal fees not covered by the contingency arrangement, living expenses while neither of us had worked full-time. The money disappeared faster than we'd anticipated. Catherine organized a final meeting for all the victims. We gathered at the same coffee shop where we'd first found solidarity. Everyone looked older, worn down by the fight. We discussed monitoring the company's compliance, but enthusiasm had waned. People wanted to move forward, not backward. The company's first quarterly report under new leadership showed improved employee satisfaction scores. They'd hired a diversity officer and implemented the promised oversight. Small victories that felt hollow compared to our losses. Change had come, but at too high a price. Jackson's new consulting firm landed a major contract with a tech startup. Catherine found his website, complete with testimonials about his innovative management strategies. No mention of why he'd left his previous position. His reinvention was nearly complete. I forced myself to update my resume, removing any reference to my last employer. The gap in employment would raise questions, but I couldn't risk potential employers contacting them for references. Starting over meant erasing years of professional development. Kai suggested we consider moving. The house held too many painful memories. Luna's nursery, the kitchen table where we'd strategized with Robert, the front door where processed servers had delivered threats. A fresh start somewhere else might help. We looked at rentals in neighboring towns, smaller places we could afford on Kai's salary alone. The real estate agent asked about children, and we deflected. Each viewing reminded us of the future we'd planned but would never have. My physical therapy sessions showed diminishing returns. The therapist suggested we reduce frequency, acknowledging we'd hit a plateau. I'd walk with a slight limp permanently, a visible reminder of invisible wounds. She recommended a support group, but I wasn't ready. The house sold faster than expected. We priced it below market, needing quick closure more than profit. Packing revealed items we'd forgotten. Luna's ultrasound photos, cards from the baby shower. Kai boxed them silently while I pretended not to notice. Moving day arrived with unexpected finality. The truck loaded, we did a final walkthrough. The empty nursery looked smaller without furniture. I touched the wall where we'd planned to hang pictures, then followed Kai out. Neither of us looked back. Our new apartment was functional but sterile. 2 bedrooms, though we only needed 1. The second became Kai's office, the door staying closed like the nursery had. We unpacked essentials, leaving most boxes sealed. Starting over meant traveling light. I found part-time work at a local nonprofit. The pay was minimal, but they didn't ask about employment gaps. My supervisor was kind, understanding when medical appointments required time off. Small mercies that felt like major victories. Kai thrived in his new position. His experience during our legal battle had given him unique insights. He implemented better employee protection policies, earning recognition from leadership. His success felt bittersweet, born from our trauma. The first anniversary of Luna's death approached quietly. We'd avoided discussing it, but the date loomed. Kai took the day off, and we drove to the cemetery where we'd had her memorial service. The marker was small, her name and single date engraved in stone. We stood there without speaking, wind cutting through our jackets. Other families visited nearby graves, their grief different but familiar. Kai reached for my hand, and we stayed until the cold became unbearable. Some wounds never fully heal. Back in the apartment, we ordered takeout and watched mindless television. The settlement money was gone, consumed by debt and moving expenses. We were financially stable but not secure. The lawsuit had given us justice of sorts, but not restoration. I thought about the other victims occasionally. Maria had sent a holiday card with a photo of her healthy son. Catherine had taken a position with a workers' rights organization. The others had disappeared back into their lives, our shared trauma and unwanted bond. Jackson's consulting firm expanded, according to LinkedIn. He'd hired staff, opened a proper office. His father's connections ensured steady clients. The system that had protected him continued functioning, indifferent to justice. Some people always land on their feet. My nonprofit work provided purpose, if not prosperity. I helped other women navigate workplace discrimination, though I never shared my own story. The irony of advocating for others while bearing permanent scars wasn't lost on me, but it felt like something. Kai and I found new rhythms in our smaller life. Quiet dinners, weekend walks where my pace set our speed. We didn't talk about children or the future beyond next month's bills. Survival had taught us to live in smaller increments. The company sent a form requesting feedback on their new policies. I stared at it for days before recycling it. That chapter had closed, even if its effects lingered. Moving forward meant not looking back, even when the past left permanent marks. 6 months into our new life, I realized we'd stopped mentioning the lawsuit daily. Jackson's name no longer triggered immediate rage. The trauma had scarred over, if not healed. We were different people than before. Harder, but not broken. Kai found me crying in the bathroom one morning, pregnancy test in hand. Negative, like all the others I'd hidden. He held me while I grieved possibilities stolen by stress and infection. Some losses echo forever, rippling through every imagined future. We donated Luna's things finally, unable to store them in the smaller space. Each tiny outfit felt like another goodbye. The couple who received them was grateful, expecting their first child. I hoped their story would be different than ours. Work became routine. I processed claims, attended meetings, filed reports. My limp drew occasional questions I deflected with practiced ease. The woman who'd fought Jackson felt like a stranger now. Survival had required transformation, not all of it welcome. Kai suggested counseling, but I resisted. Talking wouldn't restore my fertility or erase the scars. We'd won our legal battle, but lost ourselves in the process. Justice had come at a price no settlement could repay. Our new normal solidified gradually. Work, home, sleep, repeat. We existed in parallel. Wounded soldiers who'd won a Pyrrhic victory. Love remained, but changed. We were partners in survival now. Romance a casualty of war. The settlement had freed us from financial ruin, but not emotional bankruptcy. We'd fought for justice and received a check. The company company had changed policies that should have existed already. Jackson had lost a job but gained freedom to harm others elsewhere. I thought about Luna every day, who she might have been, the life we'd planned around her. Sometimes I caught Kai staring at nothing, and I knew his thoughts mirrored mine. Grief became our silent third roommate, always present, but rarely acknowledged. 2 years after everything began, I achieved a full day without thinking about the lawsuit. The realization came at bedtime, bringing guilt and relief in equal measure. Healing meant forgetting, but forgetting felt like betrayal. We were trapped between moving forward and honoring our losses. Kai got promoted again. I managed larger projects at the nonprofit. We saved money, though for what we didn't discuss. The future stretched ahead, different than planned, but still requiring navigation. We moved through it carefully. 2 people who'd learned how quickly life could shatter. The company sent annual reports about their improved culture. Harassment claims had dropped. Employee satisfaction had risen. They'd become a model for corporate reform. Our suffering had created positive change for others, though the exchange rate felt steep. I ran into one of Jackson's new employees at a coffee shop. She spoke enthusiastically about her innovative boss and the opportunities he provided. I listened politely, saying nothing. Some truths weren't worth sharing. Some battles weren't worth fighting twice. Our apartment became home eventually. We hung pictures, bought furniture, established routines. The second bedroom remained Kai's office, though we both knew its intended purpose. Unspoken grief lived in that space. Door closed, but never locked. Life continued its relentless forward motion. We adapted because the alternative was unbearable. Small joys emerged between the scars. A good meal, a movie that made us laugh, moments when we forgot to be sad. Recovery measured in increments too small for others to notice. The woman who'd held her stillborn daughter while her boss demanded quarterly reports had evolved into someone else. Harder, quieter, still standing despite everything. The cost of justice had been steep, but the bill was paid. What remained was learning to live with a change. Man, that flew by. Thanks for letting me tag along and toss in my usual nonsense while we tried to make sense of it all. If you're still here, drop a comment. I always end up reading way too many of them. Alright, I'm out.